48 BC, Alexandria. The greatest library the world has ever known is burning, and one man has chosen to stay behind, not to fight the fire, but to save the one thing before it's gone forever. Settle in, let the lamp burn low, and let the night carry you somewhere quieter than the flames. The war had reached the docks 3 days ago. Alexandria at war looked nothing like Alexandria at peace. The white avenues that once carried scholars and merchants now carried soldiers, Roman soldiers, Egyptian, smoke instead of incense. Tonight, the fire has reached the harbor warehouse, flame catching dry timber close to the water, spreading along the row of buildings that lined the port, sailors' rope, ship timber stores, oil cask waiting for the merchant vessels that would never sail now. And somewhere among those buildings, crates. Crates that should never have been stored so close to fire. Crates filled with scrolls, overflow from the great library itself. Thousands of them, copies made for trade, now stacked beside oil and rope and dry wood. Calais stood at the library's outer terrace and watched the orange glow spread along the waterline. He was 41-year-old, a copyist, not a famous scholar, not a philosopher whose name would be remembered, just a man who had spent 19 years with ink and his fingers, 19 years transcribing the words of men long dead, making one scroll into two, making two into 10, so that knowledge would never depend on a single fragile copy surviving. Tonight, he understood with a cold clarity exactly why that work had mattered, because tonight, some of it would never survive. A voice down corridor, another scholar, gathering what he could carry, moving toward the eastern exit. Calais, they are saying it will reach the annex by morning. He didn't answer immediately. He was standing in the long reading hall. Rows of shelves stretching into shadow, thousands of scrolls resting in the cubbies, silent, waiting. The hall smelled the way it always did, papyrus and dust and the faint mineral scent of old ink. Tonight, it also smelled faintly of smoke, just a trace, carried in through the open terrace doors. Calais, I heard you, he said quietly. The other scholar's sandals slapped against stone, retreating, the sound of an armful of scrolls shifting against a chest, then gone. Calais remained standing in the hall. He had thought in this moment that he would feel panic. Instead, he felt something stranger. He could not save the library. No single man could. Hundreds of thousands of scrolls filled this building and the annex beside it. Works of mathematics, works of medicine, plays whose only surviving copies rested on these shelves. Star charts, maps of coastlines no ship had drawn in a generation. He had spent his whole adult life in service to the idea that all of it mattered, that every voice preserved here, famous or forgotten, deserved to continue existing. And tonight, the fire did not care about any of that. Fire has a memory. Fire has no memory, no sense of loss. It simply spreads. Something heavy falling in a distant room, a shell perhaps, on a door caught by wind, Calais walked slowly down the center aisle of the reading hall. His finger trailed along the edges of the shelves as he passed. The dry whisper of his fingertips against papyrus edges. He knew this hall by feel alone. 20 steps to the astronomy section, 34 to the medical text. He had walked it in the darkness before, during storms, when the oil lamps skirted out. Tonight he walked it with a different kind of urgency, not to escape, to choose. He could not save the library, but perhaps he could save one thing, one true thing, held carefully, carried out through smoke, into whatever remained of the morning. He stopped at the shelf near the hall's quietest corner, reached up, his hands closed around a scroll case, worn leather, soft with age and handling. He knew this one without needing to check the label. He had copied it himself 7 years ago from a fragile original that had already begun to crumble at the edges, a treatise on the moment of star written by a woman named Aglonaik, whose original observations exist nowhere else in the world. No other library held this work, no other scholar had thought to preserve it before the original disintegrated entirely. Calais had spent 4 months on the copy, long evenings, aching hands, ink stained fingers by lamplight, letter by letter, line by line. At the time, it had felt like ordinary work. Tonight, he had ever picked up a reed pen at all. He carried the case to the small writing desk near the terrace, set it down. The chair familiar beneath him, the way it had been familiar for 19 years. Outside, the glow along the harbor had brightened. He could hear it now, faintly, not just crackling, a low roar distant like wind through the canyon. His hands were steady as he lit the small oil lamp on the desk. Flint against steel, a spark. He cupped his palm around it gently. The wick caught. A small warm flame rose, steady in the still air of the reading hall. He unrolled the scroll case carefully, the leather cover sliding free. Inside, the papyrus itself, slightly yellowed, dense with careful lettering, diagrams of star positions, small annotations in the margins where he had once clarified an ambiguous phrase from the original. He was not going to try to save the scroll by carrying it into a burning street. He knew what happened to men who ran through fire clutching fragile things. They dropped them, or the fire found them anyway. Instead, he had a smaller task in mind. One copy already existed there. He would make one more, a second copy, small, compact, written quickly but carefully, onto a thin sheet he could fold and carry inside his tunic, against his chest, where fire could not easily reach unless it reached him first, not the whole treatise, the essential parts, the observations that mattered most, the parts that, if lost, could never be reconstructed from memory by anyone else alive. He dipped his reed pen into the inkwell and began. The pen moved across the thin sheet, slowly at first. His hand had done this motion 10,000 times before. It knew the weight of the properly loaded pen. It knew how much pressure to use so the ink would not float on cheap papyrus. Outside, A horn sounded somewhere near the harbor, distant, followed by shouting, faint and formless. He did not lift his head. A line of numbers, star positions record across different seasons. A diagram simplified but faithful, showing the original ski observation about the comet's path. The old egg, familiar from thousands of nights, just like this one, except that tonight, the deadline was not a scholar waiting for a delivery. Tonight, the deadline was the fire itself. He worked without hurrying his hand, even as his heartbeat quickened. He had learned this discipline long ago. Rushed copying produces errors, and an error copied forward became a lie told to every reader who came after. Even now, especially now, the work deserved care. The lamp flame trembled slightly as a draft moved through the terrace doors. He shielded it instinctively with his free hand, without looking up. Outside, closer now, he heard something collapse, a distant crash, timber giving way. Still, his hand did not rush. He thought as he wrote about all the things this hall contained that he could not save tonight. Tonight, he was simply the latest person to make that choice. Someone before him had made it. For the original observations he now carried, someone after him, he hoped quietly, without being able to know, would make it again for this very sheet, now drying beneath his hand. The final line, he set the pen down, read back over what he had written, checking each figure against his memory of the original, all of it correct. He folded the thin sheet carefully, once, twice, small enough now to fit inside the inner pocket of his tunic, against his chest. He pressed his palm flat against it for a moment, feeling the shape of it, safe against his ribs. One true thing, carried carefully, was worth more than an armful of scrolls dropped in a panicked street. He knew this hall by feel alone, and tonight, feeling his way through it in, he said a quiet and wordless goodbye to all of it. He looked instead toward the quiet streets leading away from the harbor, toward wherever morning would find him. The streets were mostly empty this far from the port. His footsteps were the only sound for long stretches. Sandals against packed earth. He walked without hurrying. There was nowhere left to hurry to. Patiently, recording their slow movement across the lifetime of clear nights. She could not have known her careful observations would one day be carried through a burning city by a stranger's hand, tucked against a stranger's heart, because it was the only way left to keep them from disappearing entirely. You only knew that if you didn't do it, no one after you would have chance to do. He reached his sister's house near the second hour past midnight, a small stone home on a quiet street, untouched by the fire, its single window glowing faintly with lamplight. The door opened before he had even reached it. She had been waiting. She did not ask him what he would saved. She simply pulled him inside, out of the smoke-tinted air, and closed the door against the night. Nothing like the fire consuming the harbor, and entirely unlike it in every way that mattered, he said, the chair accepting his weight, the way chairs do for tired men everywhere. He reached into the tunic and withdrew the folded sheet. Tonight, there was only this small room, this small fire, and the quiet, unbearable relief of having saved one true thing. His sister brought him a cup of warm water with crushed mint, steam rising from it in a thin curling ribbon. Outside, very faintly now, the sound of the city continued, distant voices, the occasional bell, the low murmur of a place still absorbing what had happened to it. Inside, only the fire spoke. Somewhere behind him, across the city, he could not change that. But here, on this small table, one voice from centuries past had been carried one night further into the future than the fire could reach. That would have to be enough. Sim, some nights it was. His sister banked the fire low for the night, just embers breathing quietly in the dark hearth. She laid out a simple mat and a blanket near the fire's warmth, the way she always did when he stayed at night. The folded sheet still rested on the table beside him, close enough that he could see its pale shape in the dim firelight if he would turn his head. Outside, the fire at the harbor would burn through what remained of the night, and by morning there would be losses no one could fully measure. But not every voice from the hall was gone. Some had already found their way into new hands, new ink, new nights like this one. He thought of nothing else after that. The embers settled, the mint tea's warmth still faint in his chest, the folded sheet, pale and still, resting nearby in the dark. Let the fire fade gently now. Let the smoke settle far behind you. Let the small true thing you carried tonight rest quietly beside you until morning. You did not have to save everything. You only had to save what you could carry, and that was enough to let you rest.